Hey, Yingying.
Yeah, Brandon?
I'm kind of hungry. How about you?
Well, you know what we say in Chinese, right?
What's that?
民以食为天.
And what's that mean?
It means food is the first necessity of the people. This term defines a lot of culture in China. Eating together builds 关系, which is a critical part of living a full life.
I know it is, but before we can eat at a Chinese business lunch or dinner, first we have to know where to sit.
And a huge part of the meal to master besides eating part is that drinking part we started discussing last time, specifically how to toast and be toasted.
Although in the language of my homeland, how to get toasted is more like it. So pull up a chair and raise a glass. There's lots to get to the bottom of today. So Yingying, I know that Chinese people have been known for their hospitality since ancient times, and that quite often a relationship can be created after just one meal together.
That's right, and the tradition continues to this day. For example, when neighbors see each other, they usually ask each other, "Have you eaten?"
吃了吗?
Good. And when friends meet, they often just say, "Where shall we go eat?" And even parents, when it comes to caring for the kids, always say, "Hey, don't forget eating." So in a sense, it means that traditional Chinese culture is heavily immersed in the way that people eat.
And when it comes time to actually dine together, the most popular term here is 我请客, right? Which means
我请客.
我请客, which means I pay for you. Basically, it's my treat. Now, it's important for foreigners to know that Chinese people especially like to treat people to food. In the West, people treat each other too, and good friends who eat together a lot will often split the bill among themselves, or maybe take turns picking up the check if they see each other all the time and it's like a regular thing. But in China, people will not let you pay, at least in my experience as a foreigner, or contribute to the bill in any way if you're a guest, and really especially if you're a visitor to their city or their town. Why is that?
There are a lot of reasons, but they all boil down to the idea that taking care of guests is seen as basic good manners, and the manners involved with eating together are especially important.
You really do need to know what to do and what is taboo. Let's start with where to sit.
That's good, because where to sit is one of the most important customs to get right.
First of all, the seat that is directly across from the door is where the host or the main guest sits. That's the spot for the most senior or important person in a given group. Then the people who get seated right beside them on either side are the next most important guests, and then kind of on down around the table.
And the lowest status, youngest, less important folks, or at least the ones who don't have a big role to play in the meeting, are seated closest to the door.
It's really good to know how this works so that you don't grab someone else's seat and accidentally make the wrong impression.
Have you ever done that?
I haven't, but I was well toured before I had my first ever Chinese business meal, so I got lucky.
Well, hopefully we'll help some other person to look good too by the end of this.
The best advice I ever got, and that I'm happy to share with everyone else here, is that I never seat myself at a meeting or tell anyone else where to sit either, unless I am the host.
That's a great advice. It's also helpful to know how the food comes out so that you can pace yourself as drinks flow. In a typical Chinese meal, the food order is cold dishes, then hot dishes, then the main staple food, the rice or noodles, depending on which region you're in or what type of food you're having, both of which can be enjoyed with the hot dishes. Then the dessert and the soup come out, which I know is different from the West. And do you know what is the traditional last dish of the meal?
Yes, I do. That would be the fruit. If a platter of watermelon has landed, folks, that is a signal that it's almost time to go.
Last but not least, we cannot forget that all this eating is mixed in with drinking.
Sometimes a lot of drinking. And there are lots of things to know and try to get right too, or at least not to get horribly wrong in order to make a good impression.
When it comes to drinking at a business meal, the first thing to know is to not start drinking until someone is seated and the host or the big boss, whoever is in charge there, makes the first toast. Also know that unless you're the boss or a very senior person at table, you should only toast individual people, not the whole group at once.
Many of us foreigners already know the term ganbei, which means bottoms up or drain the glass. You actually don't always have to drain the glass with every toast, but the toaster does always have to drink more than the toastee. So you'd better know if it's ganbei time or not and then proceed accordingly.
One tip that's good to know is that if you want to show that you are a super generous sort of person, you can offer to ganbei for someone, but tell them to only drink what they want. That's a sign of respect.
What's that phrase for that?
悠着点儿.
How do I say that?
悠着点儿.
Also know that filling someone's glass is another big show of respect, so don't be surprised when someone to your side does that for you, and don't be afraid to do it for your neighbor too. But don't walk around the table to do it for someone you're not sitting with without toasting them first. That would be pretty weird.
Yes, you would. Something else that's weird is proposing a toast without saying something personal to the toastee first. You shouldn't propose a toast just to drink. Find something to say, even if it's something small.
One other thing to know is that the lower the glass, the more respect is shown.
Right. The younger or less senior person's glass should always be held just a little bit lower than the person they're toasting before the clink.
I learned this with my old company. The chairman of our board was a little bit older than me, and of course he's the senior guy, and he would actually try to lower his glass on me. And so I knew I had to go lower, and we would kind of race. And then so one day I had the idea, you know what? I just put my glass on the floor. And he thought that was hilarious. So the next time we went drinking, he went to the floor right away. And so I did too. And I thought, well, how can I top this? And then the next time we were at this restaurant that actually had carpet. It's pretty nice. So what I did was he put his glass on the floor. I put my glass on the floor, and then I laid down and I drank it sideways. Now, I don't recommend doing this necessarily, but I did get a standing ovation from the table.
Wow. But maybe the most important thing to know is that once you start drinking, do not talk about or bring back any serious business stuff anymore. Drinking together is a chance to let a hair down and relax with people, and it's usually the last step in closing a deal. Don't be seen as someone who gets people drunk and then wants to talk about business again. You will ruin people's moods for sure, and probably the deal too.
Lastly, one thing to know is that it's considered really impolite to let people drink alone. I actually had a similar situation with that same man. We all had a meeting in the morning, and we were grabbing a kind of a quick lunch before going across town. And it was a spicy food restaurant, and I wanted a beer, just for me just to wash the food down. And the big boss made a really big show of, oh, I am so sorry, but I cannot drink with you. Please accept my apologies. And I thought it was really over the top. And I was thinking, I don't need you to drink with me. I just want to have a beer. And my assistant, who's also the translator, explained, well, it's considered impolite for him to not drink. I said, oh, well, maybe it'd be weird. I won't order the beer. And she said, no, now it'd be weird if you cancel the beer. So I had the beer, but I learned an important lesson.
That's funny, but also normal here in China. The bottom line is that drinking together is one of the Chinese ways to show politeness. And sometimes maybe too much, of course. But that's where that reaction came from anyway.
Good to know. I wish I'd known you before, Ying. I would have had it squared away.
So, Brandon, are you still hungry after all that? Or maybe a little thirsty?
Maybe a little bit of both now that you mention it.
Well, we've learned a lot today. Maybe we should practice over a meal. We've earned it.
I think that's a great idea.
We've learned about where to sit, and it's a good idea to not sit yourself if you're not the host or the biggest boss in the room.
We covered some of the many rituals involved in toasting and how to not make a fool out of yourself by accident.
We also heard a little about how to have fun in a good way. With lowering the glass ritual you described, also I'd skip the laying on the floor part unless you're with really good friends. And even then, to be honest.
Fair enough.
The rest of the week, we'll learn more about good manners, including name card game, how to end the night, and much more.
Then on Friday, we'll tie it all together and give you a preview of what's coming up next week.
I'm Yingying Li.
And I'm Brendan Davis.
We'll see you tomorrow on How China Works.